Hello, welcome to this discussion about government publications at the New Mexico State Library. Here we go. My name is Catherine Montoya. I'm the Government Documents Librarian here with the Public Services Bureau at the State Library. And before we get started, I'll just point out that I have linked here to our catalog for searching our collection, our Fed Docs LibGuide, and our State Docs LibGuide for more information about those documents collections. So today we're going to talk about the history of the library and the government documents collections, the overview of the federal documents collection, and an overview of the state documents collection. Then we'll talk a little bit about how to start searching for things, and then we can leave room for questions. So the history of the state library. In 1915, an act was passed to regulate the management of the state library and to regulate that it was governed by a board of trustees. In 1929, that turned into legislature that approved a state library extension service. By 1931, we were in the Palace of the Governors in downtown Santa Fe. Between 1949 and 1963, we moved around a lot because our collection was growing, and so efforts started to fund a new building. In 1960, we additionally took on the role of a federal depository library, which meant that we had to collect every single publication coming from the federal government. And so that means our collection was growing exponentially. So we definitely needed more room. By 1966, we moved into a location on Don Gaspar, which is still in downtown Santa Fe. In 1978, we also took on, through legislation, becoming a depository clearinghouse, which means that we now started to accept all or collect all of the publications coming from government, state government agencies, and then taking copies of those provided to us and depositing them with libraries across the state, and we still do that to this day. In 1998, the library came to its current location here on Camino Carlos Rey. In 2008, we became a selective federal depository, so we no longer had to collect everything coming from the federal government. However, in 2016, we signed an agreement with NMSU and UNM to be a shared regional library. And so UNM is technically the regional library and responsible for collecting everything, but NMSL and NMSU agreed to house and continue to house the portions of the entire regional collection. So we each have areas that we collect and will collect into the future, and they're sort of areas that appealed to our communities as we saw it. So the federal collection. So like I said, as a selective and a shared regional, we have some things that we select from the larger federal collection that we feel are as appropriate for our community. And then we have what we've agreed to keep forever for the federal collection as part of our agreement with the other institutions. So some of the things we have are serial set volumes, which is everything that's coming out of Congress. And that goes back, our collection goes back to the late 1700s. So we also have Civil War records, we have Smithsonian documents, we have census reports, and the statutes at large. Our collection, the physical collection, is quite large. We have 600,000 paper publications, 1.4 million microfiche, 160,000 maps, almost 8,000 DVDs, and 16 VHS, just in case. So as a federal depository, whether you're a selective or a regional, you are required to provide access to core resources. So the first link I have here actually goes out to the list and links for all of those core resources. So if you're interested in what those are, you can follow that link, and you can link to any of them yourself from your own library page or save them wherever you think they might be useful. So some of the things that we are required to provide access to, the first one is Ben's Guide, which is an educational tool that is geared towards children and teens, but I think it's a useful tool for people of all ages. It allows you to review the structure and function of our U.S. government. And so you may have kids in your community studying the U.S. government, and so maybe this would be a helpful tool for them to help um, kind of stimulate what they're already learning in class, you know. The next thing is govinfo.gov, which is a very robust resource that allows for searching all three branches of the federal government through one search bar. People can browse or search the content. It all depends on whether you know exactly what you're looking for or not. So you can do keyword searching, you can hone in on a specific area of the government and try and find their publications. Either way, you can tackle it. Census data is something we have to make available to everyone. And the census has a great tool that they've developed recently, or a great platform. So you can just go in and put in your geography, so like Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it will pull up all of the information from the latest decennial census, from the latest 5-year survey, and it will present all of that to you in a very user-friendly format, so you can know all the basic demographics of that area very quickly. And then if you want, you can dive down even deeper to find even more information in smaller areas. So they have links that are specific for American Indian, Alaska Native communities, so that they can better understand the numbers that impact their communities and their funding. And so I provided that link here. Another thing related to the census is the Indian census rolls. So these don't live in our federal collection, but we have them on microfilm. We have it from 1895 to 1940, and you can find out more information about these rolls through NARA. They tell you exactly what's on each roll. So there's information about the Carlisle School or the Albuquerque Boarding School, or and then different community areas as well. And then lastly on this slide, I just put congressional hearings. So we have a lot of these in print in our library, but then you can go directly to the congressional hearings either through govinfo.gov or through congress.gov. But you can also just go directly to a committee that you feel like might represent an issue that you are wanting to look at. So just one example is the Committee on Indian Affairs, and you can go to their website and they list and show everything that they're working on right now at the federal level. And you can see the hearings, see their meetings, read what they're doing, see their schedule. It's a really useful tool, and you can do that for all the committees. So some things relating to legal, land, and water resources, we get a lot of those kinds of questions here in our library. And so federal documents that relate to that, we get a lot of stuff from the Department of the Interior, which includes the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Bureau of Indian Education, National Parks, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. It plays a central role in how the United States stewards its public lands. So we have a lot of people asking a lot of questions about their resources. And then just, most recently, some of the things that have come out of that department, I give a list of their programs and services, or a link, excuse me, and then we have a link through our catalog to the Federal Indian Boarding School Initiative Investigative Report. So that's available online, but we also provide access through our catalog, so that will get you there. And then they also came up with a list of federal boarding schools as part of this investigative initiative. So those are things that have come out recently that are of particular interest to not only New Mexico, but the country and all the sovereign nations here. So moving down, we have USGS. We have current and historic topographic maps. So it's a civilian mapping agency, and they try to achieve sustainable management and conservation of biological resources. And we have people coming in just to look at the topographic maps that we have in our collection, but we will often point them to online resources as well, just so they can really dig down deep into each map that they want to see, each area, and then each time period. The other thing that we get a lot of questions about are patents and surveys. So the U.S. Bureau of Land Management has a site where you can go and put in your area, and you can put in the type of patent or plat or survey that you're looking for. I put an image of a survey here. So this is a particular area in Quay County, New Mexico. And then when you look at the patents that go to it, you can see where a particular person was assigned land. And they have this for land grants, for homesteaders, for the various types of land that was assigned throughout history. So the next thing I guess I wanted to bring up was the Native American Constitution and Law Digitization Program. So this was a project created as a cooperative effort between the University of Oklahoma College of Law and the National Indian Law Library to provide access to the tribal constitutions, codes, and other documents. So I don't know, it might be helpful for students doing research, for people just wanting to know what's going on around them in their areas. It does, I'm not sure that when I looked at it, it doesn't cover everything in every sovereign nation. So I do think they're trying to be as robust as possible, but maybe some of the areas they're looking at don't apply to everyone. I don't know. But it is a very unique project. A historic item that we have on our shelves and is also available online is Kapler's Indian Affairs, Laws, and Treaties. It was 7 volumes. It contains U.S. treaties, laws, and executive orders pertaining to Native American Indian tribes from 1778 to 1970. So someone doing historical research on these agreements to see how these agreements failed, how they impacted land, how they impacted the sovereign nations that were here, could detail it through the law and how it came down over those years. And just on the side here, I just happened to attend something about cataloging, and they had this card from the GPO, the Government Publishing Office, their card catalog for this particular item, and they just happened to show it. So they're still working through their card catalog to get it all digitized. They're just a little bit of librarian candy there. I don't know. So some things that we have on the shelf, some of these more modern things that I have up here, tricks and treats. I did not remember the connection to New Mexico that this series had until I pulled it up again. I have used it before in displays for Halloween or Thanksgiving or just for the Department of Health. So it is a 4-part series. It's created by Georgia Perez, and she specializes in diabetes education with the Native American Diabetes Project. She's from the University of New Mexico, and she worked with the U.S. Department of Health to get these produced. This series are called the Eagle Books, and in these stories, a wise eagle assumes the roles of tribal elder in a time-honored Native American tradition of using storytelling to pass on tribal culture and to teach lessons of life. So those are really fun. I love them because the government doesn't just produce these dry manuals. They collaborate with people, and they create really interesting storybooks. We have coloring books, we have comic books coming out of all different agencies that are trying to tackle topics and get people interested in what they're producing. So it's not all dry. We also have some things that I thought were interesting is we have a report on irrigation in the area from 1893. It is a very large book with maps and a lot of detail about the area at that time. We have a series of New Mexico weather documents. You can see the image of them on the side, or weather reports, excuse me, which later became New Mexico Climate. And so this is just information about our weather, our climate, what's going on in the area. And they start in 1895 and go through 1914. Another interesting document on our shelves is Notes on Community-Owned Land Grants in New Mexico. Because people are always looking for information on land grants and water and mineral rights, this is a topic area that we have a lot of stuff on. So we have inventory of the county archives, which was a WPA project, and it was part of the Historical Records Survey Program. And it attempts to not just give a list of what's in the archives in these counties, but to provide a deeper knowledge of the county history as well. The next thing we have here are laws, decisions, and opinions applicable to the national forests. So I think, discussion of that is always ongoing. The Supreme Court here just recently made a decision about public waters crossing private lands, but that also impacts public lands. And so, it's an ongoing discussion, and we have a lot of information about that as well. So the last thing I have listed here is the annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology to the Secretary of the Smithsonian Institute. We have these 48 volumes from 1881 to 1933. They are also available online through the Smithsonian libraries. And this is sort of reports, again, very much from the outside looking in on Native communities of the Americas, and trying to portray what they thought they should. And sometimes they ended up providing information that the peoples of these nations did not want shared. So these are kept in our locked case, so people can't just have free access to them. But they are used, they are looked at, and they are an interesting piece of government history. Here I just wanted to provide you with a list of federal libraries in New Mexico where you can access these federal government documents, or should be able to for most of them. I also put a link there because you can look for these depository libraries in any state. Maybe you're closer to Arizona or Colorado and you want to go there, you can look up the libraries there as well, and you will have access to them as a citizen of the U.S. Okay, our state collections. So like I said, we are a depository for all of the publications coming out of state government agencies. So we do our best to get everything that we can. It is mandated by statute that they deposit their items with us, and this is just published work. So any internal stuff goes to archives, but things that they're actually publishing for the public over the years comes to us. So points of interest, we have legislative documents going back to the territory. We have El Palacios going back to the beginning of El Palacio. We have brand books going back to the 1800s. And here, in what looks like the dietary guide on the side of a cereal box, is our breakdown of what we have. And this is just what we have cataloged. I should say, both in federal and state documents, we don't have everything cataloged, or in our modern catalog. We do have stuff in like a shelf list or an old card catalog to reference and move forward, hopefully someday soon. But so this is just what we have physically and cataloged. So that's 55,000 items. We have much more than that. We also have 3 copies of every single thing that's produced so that we can make sure we have it forever, because that is what we're charged with. So, some general agency resources. I'll start by pointing you to our digital state publication archive, or repository. These are items that are sent to us from agencies as digital productions, or items that we have digitized when we could over the years. It's not as big and as extensive as our physical collection, but it's growing. It will certainly contain a lot more going forward in time. The next thing I want to point you to is UNM's Bureau of Business and Economic Research. This is a great resource for deciphering census information for your community and deciphering how to use it for the best possible outcomes in your community. So they are open for anyone to contact and communicate with, and so they are just a really great resource. The next thing I have is New Mexico Workforce Solutions. We have a lot of people that come in and are looking for work, wanting to apply for jobs, things like that, but sometimes they maybe need a little more skills training. So we refer them to New Mexico Workforce Solutions and the resources that they have online. New Mexico Tax and Rev, we're always printing stuff off for people, especially during tax season, but sometimes even not in tax season. And they have a tribal governments liaison who works with the tribal governments of New Mexico to make tax filing and all of the things that your tribal governments have to deal with easier. That's their goal anyway. So, and then lastly, the New Mexico Indian Affairs Department. I did not know this, but I learned that they have a tribal liaison list. There is a tribal liaison for every single New Mexico state agency. So I've linked to that list for you just in case anybody might need to contact a specific agency. And they have a really great website which kind of brings together a lot of the things that we talked about at the federal level, but on a state level. So they have legislation that's going on in the state government there pertaining to the tribal nations here, the Pueblos, so it's just, they have everything. They have links to workforce solution training stuff, so it's a really great resource. So legal, land, and water, again, a big topic area for us here in New Mexico and at this library. So we often use a resource that's called New Mexico OneSource, and this has New Mexico statutes and administrative code going back to 1989. We use this a lot. People are always asking us about particular legislation. What was the wording? How can I find this law? The annotated statutes provide detailed history of how the law has changed, and so sometimes that refers people to bills and things that they want to look up as they were presented. And then what we can do is either go into our book of bills or go to the next resource here, New Mexico, nmlegis.gov for the New Mexico legislature. They have session information, the bills as they were presented and then edited, and those go back to 1996. So anything older than that, we refer to the Legislative Council Service Library, and they have a portion of that historical bill content, and then the Supreme Court Law Library also has a portion of that. So we often contact them. I mentioned earlier when the Supreme Court made a decision on access to public waters that go through private land. We had people asking about that, so I worked with the Supreme Court Law Library to get what actually came out of the decision for multiple people, actually. The next thing of interest is the Rio Grande Compact Commission reports. We have these physically in our collection. They're also available online through the Office of the State Engineer. These are things that are always coming up on people's minds, especially during drought times, and how that compact was made and how it's divided and who gets what. And So those are always of interest for our patrons as well, and maybe for yours. The next department I want to mention is the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department. We have, they're kind of similar to the Bureau of Land Management in that they provide information about the state parks and forestry management, mining data and statistics, oil conservation information. They also have a tribal liaison, and their stated mission is to seek to work with sovereign nations to fund and implement conservation and restoration efforts. So if you need to do something in your community, this is the person to reach out to help with those things. And then just one last resource that is just one example of some of the things that we have that people are interested in, is the Pueblo Indian land grants of the Rio Abajo. So the Supreme Court of the United States, this came from UNM Press, so it's in our state collection, but it obviously has influences from the federal level. So the Supreme Court of the United States, in deciding a case of extreme importance to the Pueblo Indians, was forced to admit that erroneous information with regard to the Indian nations had been given to the court in a previous case, which led to a decision which proved highly costly in money and land to the Pueblo Indians of New Mexico. So this study, the Pueblo Indian land grants of the Rio Bajo, is made in an attempt to supply, at least partially, the need so often expressed by attorneys, judges, state and federal authorities for accurate information. So, moving forward, some interesting things on our shelf. Of course, we have legislation going back to the territory. We have the Kearney Code. We have the constitutional conventions as they happened over the years before statehood. We have various constitutions. And then recently we had a group come in from UNM, from the Center of Regional Studies, who filmed a section of the 1907 Acts of the Legislative Assembly because it applied to how acequias and water was treated over the years. So I've linked to their project page so you can see what they're working on. Their film is not yet done, but just an interesting way that government documents are used to tell a story. We have all the executive orders and proclamations over the years. We do get requests for certain executive orders so they can see the language of them from time past. We have we have a lot of official New Mexico road maps. Some are missing, some are downstairs in the archives. Recently I had to pull all of ours and then some of theirs to provide images to a law firm who was trying to document the changes in the roads over a given period of time. I'm not sure what their end goal was, I didn't ask, but just something that we got a request for. The El Palacios, which is a publication from the Palace of the Governors, gets access for articles and certain authors or given topics. And we have those in our digital repository as well. We worked with them to make sure that we could preserve those over time. So there's a link to that. We also have New Mexico Magazine. It's similarly used for articles and to complete research, sometimes just for people to reminisce about things that their family members wrote or that they wrote, or or to find information about a certain topic area. We have the Laboratory of Anthropology General Bulletins, which is sort of akin to what came out of the Bureau of Ethnology at the national level, but is maybe changing. Well, it's old. The Laboratory of Anthropology is maybe changing, but this series is again sort of like outward looking in on things happening in the sovereign nations here. And then we have lots of publications from the New Mexico museums on exhibits and artists. I just have an image of 2 examples that we have in our collection here. They're just a little bit of something beautiful to see and look at and then dive into more deeply. And then I have a list of state. Okay, so here I've provided a list of state depository libraries in New Mexico that should be able to give you access to or help you access state government content. And I've provided a link here for their information because there's too many and you can't really see it clearly in the slide. So how to start searching. I guess my tips for searching is when there's a known topic area but no known title, brainstorm what agencies might have produced the information. Could it have come from the Department of Health, Education, Fish and Wildlife? Is it local? Is it national? Kind of think about what kind of publication might hold that information. So annual reports, is it a law? Is it a statute? Is it a research report? So then you can begin your search at govinfo.gov to search all the branches of the government, or you can ask us here at the New Mexico State Library for federal or state. We're always here to answer those questions. When there is a known title or agency, you can search for the agency website and then search for the publications within that website. You can search for the title on WorldCat, you can search our catalog, or again, you can contact us and we will help with that research. And that is it, and thank you so much. If you have any questions, you can contact me, or if you have any questions right now, feel free to ask.